Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
I'm Egbert, the owner of this station. Check out my website at egbert.com. That's E-G-G-B-U-R-T, egbert.com. Now it's back to Brad and John. Check out their website at bjshow.co. The BJ Show? Come on, guys. Anyway, here's B and J.
It's the show that may only be on for an hour, but it seems like it's on for 3 hours every day. I don't know how that happens.
Or 4 or 5, depending on who you listen to, Brad.
It goes on and on and on. Good morning, John Combest, C-O-M-B-E-S-T. You like the way I spell your name, right?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, well, most importantly, because it's accurately. That's the best part of how you spell my name.
John Combest, the reason I spell it is because that's his website, JOHNCOMBEST.com. He, every single day for 22 plus years, combs all these sources in the state of Missouri and comes up with the johncombest.com. Do you call it the John Combest report, or you just call it just johncombest.com? You're not like the...
just johncombest.com. I generally just, first of all, I don't refer to my website very often because I don't go around promoting it. My theory, Brad, is generally if you don't go there every day, I'm not going to promote it to you. But in general, I just call it the website, or I call it johncombest.com.
We get together, we start the show by giving John the enviable position of having Casey Kasem. Right, Casey? Is that you, Casey? Hold on. Casey, I forgot to turn his microphone on. Try it again, Casey.
I'm Casey Kasem.
We give John the enviable position of having Casey Kasem count down. And how do you do it, John? Casey?
And here they are.
At the top 3 of the state of Missouri. And Casey, once again?
In third place,
a follow-up to a story that we talked about last week that involves agriculture. The Post-Dispatch is uniquely, for the second time in a week, putting the spotlight on agriculture. More specifically, the court ruling that bans a very popular herbicide by being used by farmers. This time, the reporter, a very good reporter named Bryce Gray from the Post-Dispatch, went out and talked to a farmer from southeast Missouri named Barry Bean, who is an icon, a legend in the farming business, to talk a little bit about what the decision means for farmers.
Hold on. His name is Barry Bean?
His name is Barry Bean, and he plants beans.
Oh, my God. How'd that happen?
It would be like a gentleman named Johnny Cotton planting cotton.
Yes. Or the guy who was the sheriff in St. Clair County for a long time, Merle Justice, right?
He bringing justice. And most people don't know this, but there was a guy that worked with the homeless in St. Louis that had a lot of rice paddies. Do you know him, Brad?
Oh, yeah. I know
Larry Rice.
Yeah, Larry Rice.
So the interview with Barry Bean, Barry talks a little bit about how farming decisions, farmers make their decisions in the fall, immediately after harvest. And guys have already started, and yes, I'm saying guys because the overwhelming number of farmers are men. Guys made their decisions for their chemistry, aka their pesticides and their herbicides in the fall, and this ruling throws a monkey wrench into everything. So we bring up the agriculture story, first of all, because it's rare that the Post-Dispatch highlights agriculture twice in a week, but also this is a BFD to farmers. As a pair to this pairs nicely with 2 other stories that I have on the website today right next to it that are also involved with Bayer. We'll include these in the number 3 story, and that Bayer gave a little bit more color around their upcoming St. Louis layoffs. And remember, Bayer has branded its layoff program Dynamic Shared Ownership. And 2 very good ag reporters, Pam Caraway and Pam Smith, covered the company announcement last week. Some folks were anticipating that Bayer would say that they were spinning off their whole ag division, get it away from the aspirin part of the business. But that wasn't the announcement. The announcement was about a little bit more about the branded layoffs program. As it relates to St. Louis employees, March 5th, Capital Markets Day for Bayer, a.k.a. the day that the company talks to Wall Street, folks will have a little bit more clarity about where these job cuts are coming. Employees were notified, shall we say, last week that cuts are coming. that the workforce will be slashed and that employees will have to deal with it in the coming weeks.
And what's it called again?
Dynamic Shared Ownership, Brad, DSO.
Casey, what do you
know
think?
what it is? It's just so you know, in case you think it's just plain layoffs, it's reimagining the company, Brad. Reimagining.
Casey, what do you think about that?
We're on our way to the number one.
He doesn't care. He just wants to move.
So that's number 3. And I would also point out too, as I do once in a while, Brad, as a wink to regular viewers of my website, I have a link to a 2018 story from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. And the Post-Dispatch quoted a Bayer executive as saying, look, people have come up to us all the time in St. Louis and said, please don't InBev us. Don't worry. We will have more jobs here than ever before. I was in the room when that quote was delivered too, and I was like, okay.
You were still working there at the time?
Yeah. It was right around the time of the merger. It was the time that the Germans had invaded, or I should say, I'm sorry. It was the time that Bayer had come in and formally acquired Monsanto.
And we all know what happened with InBev. Okay, moving on.
Up a notch to number 2.
It's number 2.
The Post-Dispatch editorial today takes aim at House Speaker Dean Plocher. Now, we've discussed this a few times before. The Speaker of the House got a lot of flack for allegedly double-dipping campaign expenses and then being reimbursed by the state of Missouri for those campaign expenses. This particular editorial from the Post-Dispatch focuses on a state representative from Northwest Missouri. Her bills, or particularly one bill of hers, had not been referred to committee by the speaker. The speaker is in charge of taking bills that are essentially in the hopper and referring them to committee. She said that the speaker's act was childish. Her name is Maisie Christensen, formerly Maisie Boyd. And she said that the act by the Speaker of the House was childish. Now, to be fair, the speaker last Thursday, as I understand it, actually ended up referring the bill later than most bills. But this is just another example of the Post-Dispatch has an opportunity to once again criticize Dean Plocher, rightly or wrongly, for what it sees as transgressions against the people of Missouri.
And they obviously don't like him.
Yeah, and they'll take any opportunity, whether justified or not, to take aim at a pretty popular Missouri Republican, particularly somebody from the St. Louis area.
It's like the Post-Dispatch. Every time they print an article about Bill Eigel, they have the goofy picture of Bill Eigel. Which...
And Andrew Bailey, I think, has Bill Eigel edged because Andrew Bailey looks like he's just about to scold you.
Well, the Bill Eigel picture, remember we had him on the air, last week before?
Yeah.
The Bill Eigel picture said that was taken, like in the very last days of the Senate where they're starting to loosen up a little bit? Wasn't that what he said, something like that?
Yeah, where it was a light moment. Yeah. And, anything to make a Republican look bad.
Right, and it's not like they could take his official picture, which they have, you know what I mean? You that's all online. You can just go online anybody.
Yeah. And meanwhile, if they print a picture of Claire McCaskill, it's from when she was immediately post-college, you know?
Right, she's 25.
So that's
right?
the number 2 story, Brad.
Okay, and then finally,
the number 1.
If you are waiting for a lot of action to happen in the Missouri Senate or the Missouri House, probably going to have to wait till next week. Those pesky Kansas City Chiefs won the Super Bowl on Sunday. I don't know if anybody listening happened to watch it or hear about it, or there's some female caterwauler who sings songs that's dating some guy on the Chiefs or something. But the Missouri legislature, the House said, yeah, we're not going to be in session Wednesday or Thursday. And it's expected, if it hasn't been announced already, that the Missouri Senate may follow suit. So this will be a week of very little action. There was action on the floor yesterday. There was some action on the Senate floor yesterday.
So they're taking the whole week off?
You can expect our elected officials to be standing loud and proud at the Chiefs' victory parade tomorrow.
Yeah, but that's tomorrow. What about Thursday and Friday? There are 5 days in a week, at least a work week last time I checked. Except if you're an educator, there's only 4, right?
Yeah, that's true. In 30% of districts across Missouri. Now, Brad, you may remember, now you and I are not big drinkers, but you might remember a concept from your younger days called a hangover.
I
mean, do you really want legislators to be on the floor of the House or Senate when they're post revelry, Brad?
I am such a straight arrow; it isn't even funny. I mean, I think I've
know you are.
I think I've had maybe 2 hangovers in my entire life, and I'm just not a drinker. I mean, I'll tell the story, and it sounds stupid, but when I was in my younger years, like my pubescent years and early teens, I had some health issues. Ended up in the hospital for a couple weeks at one point in time, and they drug you up in the whole bit, and that sort of turned me off. I just didn't like the feeling of sort of feeling like I was on another planet. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. In other words, being out of control or not having all your faculties.
Yes, exactly. And it's always bothered me, to this day. And
I mean, now me personally, I didn't mind if I was drinking and I was, buzzed or lost some faculties. But to me, it was just, do you want to wake up? And you and I are both morning people, and I don't like to wake up and feel like I just got hit by a truck. You know what I mean?
Right, I know exactly what you're saying.
I don't mind losing my faculties in the evening, but in the morning, like, I gotta go. I want to be sharp.
Well, but not only that. I mean, especially when I was in college, I had a very responsible job. I was a police dispatcher, and if I showed up at work, stoned or drunk or hungover, I wouldn't last long in that job. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
There would be a point where the shift lieutenant would have a little talking with me, and then I'd end up talking to the captain, and then I'd talk to the chief, and the next thing I know, I'd be in the parking lot leaving there for the last time. That's the kind of place, but once again, I mean, and see, I've said this before, and I know it sounds sort of, at the time I was in the radio, I mean, way back when I first got in, it truly was, even though we were not in necessarily the rock and roll business, it was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Mm-hmm. And my career path was somewhat stunted because I was not invited to the parties that everybody else went to because they knew I wouldn't, do what they were doing, which was, at the time, a lot of cocaine.
I was going to say a lot of white powder.
Yeah, a lot of cocaine. That was the drug of choice at the time. Matter of fact, that was how, if you were a record promoter and you wanted to get your song on the radio, how did you do it? Well, you just, dropped a little bit of that white stuff on the program director, the music director. That's how you got stuff done, I mean, but, things have changed. Now we have iHeart where they play the same song over the entire country and, there's no localism. But
it's McRadio.
Well, yeah. Okay, those are the top three this morning. Anything to carry over from yesterday? Any follow-up or anything like that?
No, I think I don't think there's much carryover from yesterday.
Did you hear anything from Jason Rosenbaum? We talked about him quite a bit yesterday.
Any private conversations I have with folks, I probably wouldn't share on the air, Brad.
Oh, I mean, but I mean, I know he says he listens from time to time. Does he ever call you and say, "I can't believe you said that about me"?
If Jason ever shared something like that, I would share it with you privately, Brad, and not on the air.
Well, my thing is, and I will say this up front, he's a true journalist, and unfortunately, I think he's in a place where his journalistic skills are not appreciated to the extent I think they would like to be. Like, for example, take a guy like Kevin Kleen. Maybe I'm biased because Kevin Kleen once upon a time worked for me. Kevin Kleen was the kind of guy that, he just rolled up his sleeves and waded into the masses. I mean, you remember the infamous press conference where he was at with Kim Gardner, where he got shouted down. Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
And most reporters would have gone like, I don't think I want to be in this room anymore. Not him. He stood his ground and kept asking questions. And at one point in time, what is the one guy who was standing up there? We already answered your question. Sit down. A great.
Oh yeah. In Kim Gardner, her campaign staff began arguing with Kevin Kleen there.
Right.
Now I will say that I will reveal this that a large percentage of my conversations with Jason Rosenbaum are based on professional wrestling. So if there's something interesting happening in the pro wrestling industry, there's some politicos for whom the primary topic of my conversation with them is not Missouri politics, but is professional wrestling industry news.
Well, let's drop back a minute, and let me give my analysis on this, which happened last week, and people are still talking about it. There was a time when Donald Trump was the president, and the press corps was essentially adversarial toward him when he stepped in, in front of the microphone, or to his press corps, okay? Mm-hmm. And they asked, is it true that Donald Trump trims his toenails with a chainsaw? They would ask any ridiculous, stupid question, okay? Then we get Joe Biden, and nobody asks any questions anymore. Isn't it interesting how that's...
Except for Peter Doocy.
No, yeah, except for Peter Doocy. Isn't that interesting how that's changed? And especially last week was probably the biggest change where everybody went after him. I mean, no matter what agency they were there from, they were asking tough, hard-hitting questions, and he just got grumpier and get off my lawn, Biden, more than ever. And I'm thinking to myself, where were these press people when he started president, I mean, don't throw him softballs. I mean, your job is to essentially not just, John worked on that side of the equation. John was the guy who handed out, sheets or whatever, sent out emails and says, here's what you can expect from the wonderful company that I work for. Everything's great and wonderful, and don't ask any tough questions because we won't answer those. Now, obviously, I'm being facetious, but that essentially was your job, correct?
Yeah, and I was thinking about it over the weekend because I was thinking about the coverage that comes from the Post-Dispatch, and this is why I compliment a guy like Bryce Gray at the Post-Dispatch, who covers the environment. And yes, there are good environmental reporters. But to your point, Brad, I want, now that I'm not paid to flack for a company, I want the media to have a somewhat adversarial relationship with corporations because I want them to press companies for real numbers, in the fact that I was there in the room writing the messages, and I know where the holes are, and I know the questions that we don't want to answer as a corporate community. But I want a reporter like Bryce Gray to say, hey, so when are you going to tell us about the job layoffs? Hey, I've heard that you guys sent out an email Friday that outlined some of the job cuts and told people what to expect. Is it true? Well, and that's because I've been on the side of the equation where I had to say, gosh, we got another email from Bryce. What can we say?
Take that one step further with the government as well, too. You want those reporters to ask that, senator, representative, a mayor, whatever the heck he is. You want to ask the tough questions.
Yes.
And the problem we have nowadays is that with the cutbacks in newspapers and the cutbacks of the TV stations, the radio stations, the whole bit, there aren't that many reporters anymore. I mean,
and let me interrupt, Brad. And also, not many reporters, but very few of them will go to the depths that a Bryce Gray will go in today's Post-Dispatch. Now, if I was still at the company, there are word choices that Bryce made in his story that I think are inaccurate, but I'm not paid to quibble anymore, Well, but to your point, Brad, I want somebody that's pushing on a company.
I will tell you a story. Matter of fact, tell it next break, of a situation that happened to me within the last couple of months, actually within the last 3 months, where something came out about me and was in the national trade press, and only one person called me on it. One single person.
I can't wait to hear that story because I know a little bit about it, but I want to hear more.
Well, it's sort of crazy.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?